Hello, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. And very warm welcome to all of you to Imperial College London. I'm Professor Maggie Dalman, Vice President International and Associate Provost Academic Partnerships here at Imperial. It's really a real pleasure to welcome you to the college this evening to our UK-India Science and Innovation Partnerships Dialogue. And it's actually just fantastic to see so many of you in person, but also equally fantastic that in this new world, many of our global partners and friends are part of the discussion online. And I'm delighted to see so many people joining us from India this evening. Very warm welcome to everybody. I hope you join me in looking forward to an insightful and I think really timely discussion on the role of science and innovation partnerships in driving forward the India-UK roadmap to create healthier, resilient societies. At Imperial, we're incredibly proud of our long-standing and rich connections with partners in India. Our academic collaborations are with a range of academic industry and governor partners in India, as well as with our wonderful alumni community. And we're together tackling shared health and climate change challenges, including things like antimicrobial resistance, transition to clean energy, and so on. At the national level, the UK and India clearly make excellent knowledge partners, with the impressive response of the UK science community to COVID-19 serving to highlight this at this time. And it's a great opportunity this evening, I think, to celebrate UK-India science and innovation partnerships and explore how they can be strengthened to forward the 2030 vision for the UK and India. There's a huge opportunity here, and I hope that Imperial can be at the fore of supporting and forging UK-India partnerships in the coming decade. On behalf of Imperial, I'd very much like to thank all of our esteemed discussants this evening for spending their time with us. We know that you're very busy people, and it's just a real pleasure to have you here with us and share your thoughts. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to the High Commissioner for India to the United Kingdom, Her Excellency Ms. Gayatri Isar Kumar, for gracing us with her presence this evening. Your Excellency, it's my great pleasure to welcome you, I think for the first time, to Imperial College London, and now invite you to take the floor for sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
Namaskar, good afternoon, and a very good evening to those distinguished participants who are joining us from India. Professor Maggie Dolman, Excellencies, Lord Joe Johnson, Lord Jitesh Gadia, Baroness Usha Prashar, distinguished panelists, Professor Vijay Raghavan from India, Sir Patrick Vallance, Professor Govind Rangarajan, Professor May Ryan, Vice Provost of the Imperial College. I thank you very much for this very kind invitation. I'm particularly happy to be here today. For me, it's a matter of pride to be among you, talking to you just before some of the most distinguished scientists, the most erudite scientists who are at the helm of science and innovation in India. And the fact that they are joining us virtually is a matter of pride for me that I can be here with them as they discuss with you what we are going to do in the days and months ahead. Celebrate is the word. I'm happy that we are celebrating the strong and successful India-UK cooperation in science and technology, our joint achievements, and the further work that we are going to do together. So much has happened in the last 2 years alone. I say last 2 years because since the UK came out of the European Union. So in March 2020, our two prime ministers talked about what are the areas that they would like to identify for priority focus in the cooperation going forward. They realized, they used the word natural partners. They talked about, the shared linkages, the decades-long linkages that we've had in academics and science and research. And they decided that based on our complementary strengths, these would be the areas that they would shortlist. So IT was obviously there, healthcare was obviously there, life sciences, and of course, trade and the other elements in the other sectors. It's a very, very diverse set of collaboration sectors. All this was quickly developed into a fairly comprehensive section on science and technology cooperation in the India-UK roadmap that we made immediately. And of course, we consulted the stakeholders on both sides. This was then formally launched in May 2020 as Roadmap to 2030. So it was launched in May 2021 in a virtual summit between our two prime ministers. And then the science and technology elements in that roadmap, I'm happy to say, had a full range of initiatives for further development of our ongoing bilateral research, science, and innovative dialogues and engagement and joint work, and the creation of an infrastructure for doing this well. As the esteemed Dr. Vijay Raghavan and Professor Govind Rangarajan will elaborate later in this session, our Indian scientists very much value their partnerships with counterparts in the UK. We will, among the three of us, and as already been done, we will highlight some of the key government-to-government collaborations. As many in this gathering would know, since the signing of the S&T Partnership Agreement in 1996, our bilateral partnership has grown and diversified. Today, it is one of the biggest research and innovation portfolios that India has with any foreign partner. With our Department of Biotechnology alone, more than 85 collaborative projects have been supported so far in biotech, and nearly 125 joint R&D projects are there in the larger S&T space. We also undertook research into the differential severity of COVID-19. Similarly, our cooperation in entering into a licensing arrangement between Oxford and AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute to produce a Covishield vaccine is an example of our scientists coming together very swiftly, setting aside the usual procedures to quickly deliver solutions. I remember, there was this huge thing about MHRA and how long it normally takes, but there was a requirement of vaccines immediately. I see Lord Karan Bilimoria right here. We were speaking on the phone almost every day at 6 in the morning, saying, how do we get this licensing done soon so we can produce more vaccines at Serum Institute of India in time to help the rest of the world. And that's what we did. MHRA and made an exception. A team went from here to Pune, unheard of, and they worked on the recognition and the licensing and the things that were required. So this turned out to be a lifeline to vulnerable populations around the world at one of the most difficult times that our world has ever seen. It was at that moment also that I received from British scientists who had never met before so many long email messages on how the Indian doctors should quickly try this molecule, or try, don't do this at this stage, do this on day 4, try this medicine. And, trying to quickly share an experience or a best practice or a successful solution. And I was quickly relaying those to India. The whole idea was to share knowledge, to quickly address the ferocious Delta virus that was unknown to the rest of the world at that time and that was raging in India. I still remember those very difficult days. At that time, I also realized that there are about 65,000 doctors and 35 Indian origin nurses. So 65,000 Indian origin doctors and 35,000 Indian origin nurses actively contributing at the forefront in the NHS. And these professionals, each one of them, links the UK to different parts of India. They too came forward. They too said, look, we'll speak in the different languages. We'll ring up patients all over India. We'll take the pressure off your, doctors and your medical systems. Let's see how we can help. So they too rose to the occasion at that time last year. And some of the doctors, BAPIO, the British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin, raised almost £500,000 worth of assistance. That's just one of the associations of Indian doctors. I mean, and that's just one of the part of the the academic community here. I take this opportunity to also mention that our formal institutional engagements include, of course, the India-UK Science and Innovation Council that sets the broad agenda for our work ahead. We also have the UK-India Policy Dialogue, which recently met in March in New Delhi to further fine-tune our joint work. They have an impressive program of collaboration on shared priorities, and that includes climate, green technology, net zero objectives. Green hydrogen is one of our key interests, mentioned so often during the visit of the Right Honourable Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to India just last Friday. So the India-UK Global Innovation Partnership was mentioned. It's in our joint statement, which we issued on Friday, which would be an example of trilateral cooperation. So the idea is to bring a fund together, $100 million, and wherein both our governments will support transfer and upscaling of innovations from India, from the UK, to countries in Africa, Asia, and the Indo-Pacific. The idea is to accelerate delivery of sustainable development, sort of methods and ways to do things that we have found successful in the UK and in India. And more about that after a minute. I would like to also mention one of the key announcements when our two prime ministers met last week was to strengthen our cooperation in the peaceful use of civil nuclear energy, involving the Global Center for Nuclear Energy Partnership. And they also decided to work on jointly promoting research and training on nuclear and energy studies, on nuclear security and nuclear safety. And then another element in the joint statement agreed on Friday in a way which takes the cooperation in defense to an entirely new level was when our prime ministers decided to take our science and technology cooperation, our success in that sector, to our defense labs and turn our attention to joint research, co-design, co-development, joint production of defense technology and systems in key and emerging defense technologies. So I recommend that you have a look at the joint statement, and there'll be more on this in the days to come. But we are going to now see, how we are going to work together in this very sensitive area where we've all, there have been export licensing, constraints in the past. But the idea is that again, it's all a part of geopolitics as well, and trust. So we are two democracies. We feel that there should be natural, we are natural partners, and we feel that there should be an emphasis on building national resilience and self-reliance as two friendly democracies. So in this area, we've also, in defense, we've also decided to establish joint working groups. I kept hearing the word electric propulsion. I want to learn more about it as soon as I can. But there was a lot of emphasis on the new technologies and the cutting edge technologies, not only in the sector of marine, but also in aviation. So maritime electric propulsion and also in aviation. The joint statement that we issued also reaffirms our focus on wind energy, electric vehicles, and the creation of a green hydrogen hub. And our leaders have even discussed science for preservation of forests and land use and scientific collaboration on earth system sciences and joint deep sea research and marine biodiversity. We are further determined to see how we can together strengthen the global response to future health emergencies if they happen and be prepared for that. And we have ambitious plans to develop relevant vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics, giving ourselves the challenge of being able to do this, developing capability to do this within 100 days. As the distinguished guests over here may be aware, the Indian arm of the global clinical trials of COVID therapeutics has been launched, and we have announced new India-UK partnership through the Fleming Fund to address antimicrobial resistance. I also learned last year, I discovered that an Indian company, Wockhardt, is proud to have supported about 50% of the vaccine rollout in 2021 last year. They are based in Wales, and I visited the manufacturing unit. I saw a very, very dedicated crew over there who said that they worked through the weekends 24/7 because they felt that they had to make a contribution to the vaccine rollout. And Serum Institute, a partner in the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, has invested in the UK in vaccine research and development and manufacturing. So we've announced last week that London will host the next Science and Innovation Council, and we propose to establish an India-UK strategic technology dialogue this year. So our joint statement duly reflects our commitment to work on all these collaborations, including on AI, to deliver economic and social benefits in both countries. And what I wanted to emphasize, and that's what I said I'm going to come back to later, is that we have this background, we have the decisions of during the Prime Minister's meeting on Friday, for which we'd all, both teams on both sides had worked to, bring this to the level of the Prime Ministers, and this was announced on Friday. But what I wanted to emphasize is that our objective is to see that our partnership in science and technology research and in innovation should eventually bring outcomes that are most relevant not only for our mutual progress and prosperity, India, UK, but it should also enable us to bring progress and prosperity to third countries and in different sectors. So healthcare, infrastructure, climate resilience, renewable energy, cheaper ways of having sustainability. And all this should be through adaptable, affordable, and accessible technologies. And that's what I would emphasize, especially when both of us are determined that when we work apart from for our mutual benefit, but for third countries, those are countries which are developing countries that we want to help. And for them, these three goals of adaptable, affordable, and accessible technologies is really a very key goal for us. And of course, how we use these technologies to help sustain healthier, climate resilient societies. The last point that I would like to make is that in a couple of weeks, our High Commission will be hosting a healthcare conference in which we will be, inviting, everybody in healthcare on both sides to join us in the different aspects, not only the manufacturing and trading and selling, but also in regulation, in the science part of it, in the HR part of it, and anything else that our stakeholders suggest that we discuss. So with these words, I'm really looking forward to listening to everybody else. I just wanted to share what we are doing at the government level, and very, very happy to be here. And thank you once again to Imperial College for inviting me today. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for that wonderfully inspiring opening set of comments. I think it's shown the enormous breadth of areas that we can certainly work very effectively and collaboratively on. I found your comments about what happened during the pandemic, how there was that interaction and how positive that was, really inspirational. And I think we've learnt a lot about how we can collaborate at country to country, government to government level. And I just hope we don't forget that and we keep reminding ourselves of how effective this really can be. So thank you for focusing our minds. And we're now looking forward to some additional presentations. And I'm really delighted to introduce our distinguished chair for this evening, the Right Honourable Lord Joe Johnson. I think probably Joe Johnson needs no real introduction to this audience, but is currently chairman of Access Creative, the largest independent provider of further education and training for the creative industries. He's also a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School and a President's Professorial Fellow at King's College London. In his previous role as UK Minister of State for Universities, Research and Innovation, Lord Johnson was really instrumental in reforming the sector, introducing, for example, the new Office for Students and helping restore the 2-year post-study work visa for international students, which I think has been really particularly important for our relationship with India and Indian students. We're grateful for you for being a vocal supporter of UK-India knowledge partnerships, and just really delighted that you found time in your amazingly busy diary to join us this evening and to guide the discussion. So, Lord Johnson, my pleasure to hand over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Maggie. Great to be here. Great to be back at Imperial, which I got to know a little when I was Universities and Science Minister, and I came to appreciate the incredible role it plays in the UK and indeed global knowledge economy. And it's really good to be here at this important and very topical discussion about how we can deepen the UK-India knowledge partnership. I think, as we all saw in recent days during the visit of the Prime Minister to India, the stars are really aligning for very real progress in the UK-India relationship. And I think in no area is this clearer to me than in the area of science and education. And I was very pleased to see both those areas feature prominently in the communiques that emanated from the recent summit. My role in this is to act as a sort of facilitator of discussion between the real experts that Imperial has gathered together to help us explore these areas. And my first job is to introduce our two keynote speakers, who are both incredibly eminent figures in our respective countries. I knew Sir Patrick Vallance, the UK government's chief scientific advisor, before he was a global celebrity, which he has become, and deservedly so, because of the incredible work he's been undertaking on all of our behalves during the course of the terrible pandemic of the last 2 or more years. Sir Patrick is going to follow, though, Professor Vijay Raghavan, who has recently stepped down as the principal scientific advisor to the government of India. And Professor Raghavan is going to speak to us remotely, I believe. So I think the first job is to ask Sir Patrick to take a seat up here, if you wouldn't mind, whilst we listen to Professor Raghavan deliver his remarks over Zoom. There you are, wonderful. Professor Raghavan, over to you. Great to see you again, and we look forward to hearing your words.
Thank you very, very much, It's wonderful to see you here. Mary Ryan. Today we are going to be discussing how we can promote the crucial role of science, technology, and innovation partnerships in driving forward the 2030 roadmap for India-UK future relations to create a healthy, climate-resilient society. Now, I have a big problem because almost everything I wanted to say has been said by Her Excellency, the High Commissioner, and anything which is left and I could just duck and pass on the baton to Patrick, but let me cover some points which I think could be interesting as we go ahead. Now, if we look at the past, the present, and the future globally, we have a tendency to sanitize the past and say that the past is perfect, and we always seem to find the present very tense and the future uncertain. And let's look at these contexts, these statements in the context of India-UK relations in science and technology in modern times. Now, the rocky and complex colonial relationship led to the establishment in the 19th and 20th century of institutions in India, and these were principally the presidencies of Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta, which allowed training of people on one hand for the colonial enterprise, but resulted as a collateral in extraordinary talented people in science and technology coming forth. And these were both big universities, but also small colleges, often missionary colleges. Now, one great example is the mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan, who wrote to Professor Hardy at Cambridge and completely transformed our view of number theory and whose impact we still see today. Now, that was an extraordinary genius. But there were other very, very talented people who grew through that system. Jagdish Chandra Bose, Satyan Bose, C.V. Raman, who did all his work in India and studied in India, but had close relationships with the UK, of course. And later on, post-independence, many great scientists who developed science in India today, Homi Bhabha, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, Meghnad Saha, Mahalanobis, these people built great institutions in India. But if you look at the relationships between our two countries and how they changed, the first early relationships were these individuals going to UK, mixing with the best and the brightest from all over Europe, and coming back and doing their science or setting up institutions. So it was very individual driven. Along with this, Britain, just before independence, set up many major institutions and institutionalized science. And these were the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, the Indian Council for Medical Research, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Now, one important point to keep in mind at that stage, that these really were very critical for the post-independence industrialization and growth of the scientific enterprise. Now, a little later, this changed as India started developing its own institutions. UK and India famously collaborated in setting up the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi, and the other IITs which came up similarly had collaborations with the United States, the Soviet Union, with Germany, and so on. And these IITs and other engineering and medical institutions which came up, again, some with international collaboration, also with the UK, transformed the capability and the desire of Indians, young Indians, to grab opportunities enormously, and resulted on one hand in the transformation, the industrialization, and the use of science and technology in India, and on the other side, Indian contributions to science and technology globally by people going elsewhere. So that was the later phase of Indian-UK collaborations. This was sort of a standard way, and there were individual interactions and interactions between institutions at a low level, and much of this was seeded by standard structures whose importance cannot be underestimated. The British Council was one. They had scholarships for Indians to go to the UK and come back. There were other exchange programs, the Commonwealth exchange programs, and these again allowed mixing of talent between both our countries. The British Council, fellowships were really terrific. I remember I went to Cambridge to the Medical Research Council Laboratory of Molecular Biology for a few months, and that transformed my view of science as a graduate student. I had gone to the British Council to see whether they could support me, and there was a very bright officer there, Vijay Nasargi, who apologized and said that they don't support fundamental research, but all their efforts are in development. So I told him I'm a developmental biologist, and he said, fine, we'll support you. So that was a very nice and flexible approach they had. And these kinds of approaches of collaboration, again, were very impactful in India. But going ahead, we have a big challenge, and the solution to the challenge was something the High Commissioner pointed out in the examples of what we have in terms of our potential collaborations. And I will, address those, in a different context, not just between UK and India, but in terms of what globally where we are. Globally, since the time of the first industrial revolution, and I remember a very beautiful photograph of Mahatma Gandhi, in Manchester, talking to the families of workers going on strike against the kinds of industrialization which was taking place. That reflecting the tensions, on one hand, of creativity in science and growth, growth of thermodynamics as a pure science, and engines to drive the industrial revolutions were simultaneous, but they also created social tensions exemplified by Mahatma Gandhi's vision. These kinds of tensions continue today to the fourth industrial revolution. And at the heart of it is the following aspect, that over these revolutions, we have had extraordinary products at low cost coming in, because substantially we have asked future generations to pay for the environmental cost of what we get today. This has been a fundamental feature of economic growth, which we are now all over the world trying to grapple with, because the consequences of climate change, loss of biodiversity, challenges in sustainable development, environmental issues of pollution all come up. So science and technology has, on one hand, dramatically transformed our ability to survive in this planet amongst very difficult conditions. But the result of that has been we have moved from merely surviving, to those humans today, as others have pointed out, the philosopher Dan Dennett has pointed out, that we hold the paintbrush on the canvas of the earth. We determine the future of this planet. This is the enormous challenge which we have to deal with. So how do we, going forward, have an ability to have energy available at low cost, yet have sustainable development without creating inequities and have equal opportunity and access? Now, it's in that context, what we have done so far in terms of our collaborations need to change enormously. And how should they change has been pointed out very, very nicely by Her Excellency Ms. Gayatri Isar Kumar. And if you take the May 4th, 2021 strategic partnership roadmap for 2030, and the recent joint statement from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's visit to India last Friday, and you search for the word science, and it's amazing how much of that document, those documents have science in them and cover every aspect of what is needed to address global future issues. And these include communications, artificial intelligence, how to make them ethical yet accessible, collaborations in climate change issues, adaptation and mitigation, biodiversity and its prevention of its loss, marine research. India has launched a major multi-billion-dollar deep ocean mission to explore the oceans and its biodiversity. There'll be collaborations there. You heard about antimicrobial resistance, and that's going to be a big challenge going forward. The pandemic has been tough, but we have to learn from that and create funds to deal with creation of resources to combat future events which are potentially could happen. They're sort of anticipatable. We know what they're likely to be. Yet we need investment now so that we can go past early stage trials for their solutions. Now, how does one create new kinds of structures? And we have to learn from, I think, two examples which are there in Europe. One, at the high-end technology, you have structures such as CERN, the European nuclear science collaboration, which brings together all of many major countries across Europe with associate partnerships with countries such as India to address fundamental research challenges. Now, these may seem esoteric, but they've been very important in creating industry capable of addressing these major technological challenges which have spin-offs in our daily lives. The other example is the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, created at a time when Europe seemed lagging far behind the US in terms of capabilities in the life sciences. But the European Molecular Biology Laboratory has got extraordinary training capabilities at Heidelberg, and the European Molecular Biology Organization has got also meetings and workshops and other kinds of events all over Europe. The result of this is today Europe, including the UK, are extraordinary countries in terms of the life sciences. The EMBL, the European Molecular Biology Lab Bioinformatics Center in Hingston, has been really top class during the pandemic. So that model needs to now become global. Can we have a situation across all of science and technology where there are centers of high quality, where people from all over the emerging economies and the countries of the North come together in an open and collaborative manner to address the major challenges in climate change, biodiversity, sustainable development, and the environment? They don't have to be physical structures which are big and cumbersome, but they need to be networked, important structures which are fit for purpose. That's eminently feasible, and the pandemic has been a wake-up call for us to ensure that we have these kinds of interactions. So once again, thank you all very, very much for allowing me to be here. It's a great pleasure. Do look at the joint statements, search for science, and you'll find a number of extraordinary opportunities which are there, fit for purpose for us to go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Raghavan. We're now going to hear from Patrick Vallance. So Patrick Vallance.
As Vijay said, High Commissioner said an awful lot of this, and now Vijay's done the rest. But that's not going to stop me. Science fundamentally rests on partnerships, and it's a great pleasure to be here for that reason. The Prime Minister came back from India, and that was clearly a very successful visit, and science and technology featured very heavily. The High Commissioner said it's a natural partnership, and that natural partnership has been absolutely wonderful with Vijay over the past few years, who's been a really superb counterpart in India and somebody who's been a great pleasure to work with. And when I think about the UK-India partnership, it makes me think a little bit about the influence that it's had on my career and my interest in science. And thinking of Indian scientists who've had direct impact, everyone immediately goes to C.V. Raman, who has influenced nearly everyone's work, who's worked in the biological field or indeed the physical sciences, and Jagdish Chandra Bose, who I think probably was influential in the sense that I spent too much of my childhood worrying about crystal radio sets instead of playing football or something, and I can trace that back to him. But Indian scientists have also played an enormously important part in terms of UK science. And Indian scientists who've come to live in the UK have been crucial to the environment here and the advances here. And in the area of genomics and thinking about cellular signaling mechanism, one thinks about Hargobind Khurana, Venki Ramakrishnan and Shankar Balasubramanian, who have all been absolutely instrumental in unpicking some of the mechanisms that are so fundamental to life. One thinks about projects that are coming from India that are influencing the world, the Mars orbiter, and some of the entrants to the Earthshot prize. So India today is firmly on the path to being a science superpower. And by that, I mean not just does it do good science, but does it have the means to translate that into companies, products, outcomes that benefit society and speak to this issue of a resilient, sustainable, healthy planet. Venture capital investment has increased nearly threefold in India in the last couple of years. R&D investments up to 2% of GDP. It's the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. And astonishingly, 29% of the world's STEM graduates coming from India. That is an extraordinary position to be in, and one which is going to be influential in science right the way across the world. And in the UK, of course, we know we have a strong science legacy. Top universities in the world, this being one of them, of course. And that strong science base is increasingly also linked to the ability to translate that again into companies' growth and the private sector high intensity R&D activity that's so important to actually turn this into societal benefit. We have a big increase in venture capital investment here, big increase in the number of unicorn companies, so startups which have reached a valuation of $1 billion or more. And this has been recognised in the UK by the formation of a new National Science and Technology Council chaired by the Prime Minister. And the reason I raise that is science and technology is not something off to one side or a nice to have or something that you just think of as an academic pursuit. It is fundamental to nations across the world. And therefore, it ought to be on the in tray of any Prime Minister. On day one, a Prime Minister, I believe, needs to think about things like the economy, national security, and needs now to think about science and technology. And when we look at the National Science and Technology Council, the four areas that are priorities are resilient environment and biodiversity, of course, life sciences, health and well-being, security, defence and space, and data and the digital economy. And they are, of course, exactly the same things that India is also interested in and concerned about and wants to know how we can advance those areas through science and technology. So we do have, as Vijay has said, we do have collaborations and they're very strong. I think the UK is India's second largest collaborator. UKRI, the funding agency in the UK and India, or UKRI in its previous iterations and India, it's over the past decade or so, there's been about £550 million spent in that relationship. A large sum of money, but actually much more to do. The Science and Innovation Council, the Ministerial Joint Council, as the High Commissioner has already said, is a very important way in which the bridges between the two countries and the forward strategy around what are the priority areas can be set, and I think will remain an important mechanism. But again, coming back to, it's not just about universities to universities, it's also about businesses. The UK-India Innovation Club and the Young Entrepreneurship Forum, both really important, particularly, I think, the idea that young people are really interested not just in, can I discover science for knowledge? Yes, very important, crucial to the overall activity, but can I do something with that practically? What does that mean for company formation? COVID has been mentioned. And when we think about the relationship in COVID, the AstraZeneca Serum Institute of India relationship was really, really important. And we've heard how crucial it was to get that going and to make rules that often take years to sort out moved very quickly. And that has led to people right the way across the globe benefiting from that. So a bilateral partnership leading to true global differences. And my dialogues with Vijay over this period have been crucial for thinking in this country, and I hope also crucial for thinking in India. And that relationship between scientists is important. In climate, relationships between the Met Office in this country and in India have been very important for looking at extreme weather warnings. And we know that with the climate change, which is already baked in, of course, we need to make sure that we limit that. But we know that even with what's baked in, we face major changes in weather patterns, increased extreme weather, and that scientific collaboration to get that predictive and to get the scale of the prediction right, so we can move from very big scale down to smaller scale, is going to be crucially important. I've mentioned innovative businesses several times, and the recent visit ended up with about £1 billion worth of various interactions between high-end innovative R&D companies being discussed. There are UK companies which have got a base in India and have had them for a very long time. Why are they doing that? Because they know that that's a country where there's a lot of talent, a lot of people who can actually contribute to those businesses. And the one that I worked for 12 years before I took up this job, GSK, reaches its 100th year in India next year. And why is it there? It's there simply because it's a great place to have an innovative business. There's great talent. There's a great ecosystem of not only research institutes, but also small companies and big companies, and of course, a huge, huge presence of pharmaceutical and life science sector in India. So the Roadmap to 2030, actually provides huge opportunities. And those opportunities range from antimicrobial resistance, a problem that is a chronic pandemic that is still going to cause us all problems over many years to come. And here at Imperial, there are strong links with Amrita Institute and others. Climate change, I've already mentioned. St Andrews and Madras have extremely strong links in this area. And the One Sun, One World Grid initiative, which was announced at COP26, again, brings together partners. I'll add one other. If during this pandemic, we had been able to get vaccines, not in 300 days, but in 100 days, if we'd been able to get an initial regimen of therapeutics in 100 days, and if we'd been able to get reliable, approved diagnostics in 100 days, and made that accessible across the world, think about the number of lives that would have been saved. So the 100-day mission, which was endorsed at the G7 and then the G20, and is now being taken up right the way across the world, is a crucial part of this. And I think the UK clearly is going to be a part of trying to make that happen. How can we prepare ourselves, detect, pick up through surveillance, new infectious agents, and be prepared to deal with them within 100 days, is a big moonshot mission that actually is achievable and requires scientists right the way across the world. India, UK have a big part to play in that. So the various things that have been put into place provide structure and provide common priorities. And that's important because it enables people to rally around them. We've seen how at COP26, joint statements from chief scientific advisors, including Vijay joining this from India, can make an impact, and the COP meetings need that science impact science input in order for it to be really driven by science. Talent, data, and dialogue are going to be important in all of this. And as Prime Minister Modi said, if you think about the UK-India science partnership, in his words, it's an unbeatable combination. I think that's true, but it's only true if we do something to make it true. And I really agree, there's lots in place, there's lots of ambition, there's a good roadmap, but the sorts of things that Vijay has just talked about, the sorts of mechanisms and structures that need to come along with this to make this durable, I think are another important part of how we should think about this. And I hope this comes up in some of the discussion shortly. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sir Patrick. And I'd like to welcome to the stage Professor Mary Ryan, who is the Interim Vice Provost, of Research and Enterprise. Vice Provost of
It's
Research
fine.
Enterprise here at Imperial. So she needs very little introduction. The Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. So welcome to you, great to have you with us. We're going now to have a panel discussion for the next half an hour or so. And I'd like to start by asking Mary and Professor Rangarajan to respond to the very thought-provoking and stimulating introductory remarks which we've just had. Mary, I'll kick off with you.
Yeah, thank you. And I would just like to thank the speakers for really insightful comments and saying everything that needed to be said almost. And I think you're in danger of having an evening of heated agreement here. But I would say that the fact that we had such, I think, resonant comments speaks to the shared values and shared ambitions between the two nations. And I think highlights that natural partnership that we've talked about and really reinforces, I think, why we should be working together much more closely. There's a few, I guess, important points on that. One thing is that we have a roadmap to 2030. That's a very ambitious timeframe, but it's really critical that we only have ambitious timeframes going forward because the global challenges and the urgency of the challenges require us really to work. I think the language is at pace. But not to be daunted by some of these challenges, because if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that we can do things properly and at pace. All right, and I think even faster would be better, but this short time frame of and really large ambition is really critical to try and deliver on some of these challenges. We talked a little bit about intergenerational debt, and I think that's a really important thing to remember, and the idea of a just transition. But at the same time, unlocking the innovation potential to drive prosperity whilst we're addressing these challenges goes in some ways to mitigate that. And I think it's really important that we bear that in mind. We're not just thinking about prosperity for now, we're thinking about creating technologies and industries for the future and for those future generations in a clean way. And it's the last point I will just touch on, because I realize you've got lots of questions to ask, is we've seen, is that for you? I thought I was, but can you hear me at the back? Yeah, okay. The roadmap and all the announcements have science and technology running through it. And I'm going to say something slightly heretical at Imperial College, but science and technology alone is not going to solve these problems. And a part of the challenge, of course, is, I guess, leveraging the science and technology to deliver. And what do you need to put around that in terms of policy and investment and talent, that we actually unlock the science and technology to deliver the challenges going forward, and to do that in a way that is systemic. All right, we've seen hydrogen and we've seen green hydrogen, which is nice, not blue or turquoise. We've seen green hydrogen, which is the way forward. Wind energy, nuclear energy. We cannot see those in silos. We need an energy system, and we need to understand how the energy system works together. And we have to be really careful, I think, we don't put them into little boxes where they don't all integrate well together. And that's part of this operationalizing it, part of what we're talking about right now, but really making sure we look at this holistic approach to technology in the climate crisis, which has ripples through the healthcare system as well. I'll stop.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. Professor Rangarajan, can I ask you to offer some opening thoughts?
Thank you. I echo the sentiments expressed by the previous speakers. I hear an echo. Is that? Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, fine. So I think the India and UK partnerships can be strengthened by broadening the ambit of such partnerships. Given the prominence that oil has acquired in recent years, let me start with oil, but not the old fossil fuel oil, but the new oil data. I think this has not been talked about that much. I feel that just like stock exchange, we need to create an India-UK data exchange through which we can share important data. I think this will be crucial for all the knowledge partnerships to thrive. And of course, there may be national security and privacy constraints which restrict data sharing. But I think we still have more than sufficient data that will be useful to policymakers and scientists on both sides. What is the meaning of a strategic partnership, as India and UK hope to have, if you're not willing to share one of your most strategic assets, which is data? I think we can forget G20. What we need is a G2 comprising India and UK for the data. Probably in addition to the free trade agreement, we need to execute a free data agreement. As far as innovation is another point which is mentioned, I think here again, partnership in this area can be strengthened. Startups have demonstrated that they not only tackle problems like food delivery and so on, or delivery of books and things like that, but they can also tackle big problems which were hitherto addressed by government. For example, SpaceX and Tesla have demonstrated these. And something similar, I believe, can be encouraged in climate and health by the two countries through some joint funding. So whether if you can set up a dedicated India-UK venture fund for financing startups in especially deep science and deep technology startups in climate and health, I think they will come up with very innovative solutions which will help us meet the very ambitious roadmap that we have in this 2030 roadmap. So let me stop here with these comments.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Rangarajan. So we're now going to have a panel discussion, which is going to be a little bit awkward because we're doing it half in real life, half over Zoom, but we'll do our best. And then I'm going to ask a few questions and then turn to the audience. So if you have questions, indicate to me by raising your hand and I'll come to you in a few minutes. But I want to start off with just a general question, which I'll put to the UK representatives on the panel and then the Indian representatives on the panel, which is that when the UK and India do science together, it's of a very high quality and high impact. Indeed, the category normalized citation impact of UK-India research is higher than that achieved by scientists in either country on their own. And that's quite usual for international collaborations. But actually, UK-India science is more impactful than the science which the UK does with many other countries around the world, including China. However, in volume terms, UK-India research is relatively small. And I want to explore what the barriers are that remain between us as countries that are stopping us from doing more of this highly impactful science. So turning perhaps to Sir Patrick and then to Mary, could you just identify what you think the biggest barriers are to us doing more of what is highly impactful international collaboration with India?
Well, I think we can see that what drives that sort of collaboration is well-structured mechanisms to make it happen. And, there's not a lack of will. There's lots of potential. And that tells me that if there were systems that really allowed the obvious things that need to happen, joint funding, exchange of people, which is incredibly important, the ability to make that work, and the appropriate sort of institutional arrangements that allow that to happen with a low barrier, we'd see much more of it. I mean, I think it is almost that simple. If you want to do that, those are the sorts of things you need to see. And one can take as an example of that, the EU funding schemes that got put into place led to a huge number of collaborations across Europe, which weren't there before. Of course, there was some collaboration before, and of course, there was some one-to-one things, but it led to a step change in the types of things that could happen. It takes a long time to get those things working properly. They don't happen overnight, but ultimately they do start to cement relationships. And what's interesting is that, of course, those schemes can never fulfill all of the desires of all of the researchers. But once you start to make joint applications and joint programs to get together, the chances are they're going to happen anyway, because you'll find another way of funding it. And I think that, together with business being involved in it, starts to create the system and the sort of culture that allows it to be progressed and expanded.
Mary?
Exactly what he said. I guess plus a focus on time frame, because I think often there's a sense that we should try and do something with in a bilateral way with a partner, and we might seed some small grants or enable travel and workshops, and we generate lots of ideas, and then it's not followed on. So it's really about the framework and the structures to actually enable those relationships develop. So I think thinking along the right timelines and the right time frame, so you build those communities and you make those relationships resilient actually and start to deliver, because once they start to deliver, they get a momentum of their own. But quite often we don't have the right time horizon on anything we want to initiate. And that free enabling talent to move between the two countries is really critical.
Thanks, Mary. Professor Raghavan, turning to you first, if I may, what do you think the biggest barriers have been, and what do we need to do to remove them?
Well, there are broadly two kinds of barriers, and I think both are removable. The first is a conceptual one, and as we heard, we really need to stand on the foundations of what we've done and think ahead. That conceptual barrier can be overcome, and Professor Rangarajan pointed out one way by which we can overcome that. For example, if you use data and AI and its analysis as a horizontal, cutting across multiple fields, we really have today the ability to take on big problems in agriculture, health, pollution, and so on, and combine basic and applied science in a rapid delivery manner, which we just heard as necessary. So that's one conceptual barrier to be overcome, and it's overcomable. The second is a very interesting government bureaucratic barrier we need to get into. I think both our countries need to learn from America. America has succeeded because of its welcoming nature for ideas and immigrants from anywhere in the world. The UK has actually done that historically. Many of the great successes in UK science have been people who have come from South Africa, from Eastern Europe, from Argentina, from India. But UK needs to, in my opinion, do this on scale in a manner which is distinct from its general policy on immigration. Talented people, best and the brightest in the world, need to be able to come and circle in and out very, very freely. If the UK has to do this, India has to do this 100 times more. India really needs to be culturally, in terms of its infrastructure, its institutional structures, welcoming of people from anywhere on scale. Indian talent today is really interesting because it can think laterally and in a manner not constrained by the ideas which successful science communities have. There are extraordinary capabilities. You have, Professor Rangarajan here. His institute is setting up a top quality new kind of medical college, and it's also been pioneering, as have been other institutions, in using data sciences in new ways. So the openness of India to have young people, eminent people coming in very easily for all nationalities, and similarly an opening up of the UK would be very, very valuable in addition to grasping new ideas.
Thank you. Professor Rangarajan.
Yeah, I strongly second what Vijay said, because, for example, if I look at US, there are not very strong institutional relations between government to government relations compared to what we have with UK or France and so on. But still, the relationship thrives because US has been welcoming, and many of us, including me, have done their PhDs in the US. So there's a natural tendency to collaborate, despite not having very formal, linkages, intergovernmental linkages. So I think that is where we really need to work on, both India and UK, on developing this relationship where students from both sides go to the other country very freely, spend a lot of time there, and are able to collaborate. Once that happens, I think science is still, essentially driven by person-to-person interactions, and governmental incentives and others can do only so much, to further enhance collaboration, especially since you are talking about the lack of quantity of collaborations, even though the quality is high. I think that will be primarily be driven if large number of Indians and UK citizens go back and forth and develop personal relationships. That is where I think I agree that UK and India need to match that scale which US has developed.
Thank you very much. India's national education policy is a very ambitious program, and it includes a commitment to create a new overarching science organization called, I think, the National Research Foundation, which will sort of put Indian science shoulder to shoulder with organizations like the National Science Foundation, or NIH, in the US. The UK has been along this journey in recent years, trying to create a similar kind of body, UK Research and Innovation. And I'd be interested to, first of all, learn from Professor Rangarajan and Professor Raghavan what they hope for from this new organization. And then perhaps I'd like to ask Sir Patrick and Mary what their experience of UKRI has been, and whether they think there are any shared learnings from going down this path in creating overarching science organizations in their two countries. So turning perhaps to Professor Raghavan first, and then to Professor Rangarajan from the NRF.
You're muted, Vijay.
Thank you very much, Joe. This is a very, very interesting and important point. Today, 90% of Indian research support go to major elite institutions across the country, where only 10% of our students go. 90% of our students go to colleges and state universities, where only 10% of our research budget goes. Unless India democratizes access to science, we are not doing justice to our young democracy. This is like a salt and pepper mix. We have a pepper of top quality institutions and the salt surrounding it. And no matter how much water you put, you're not going to have the salt and pepper mixing. The National Research Foundation aims to change this by making our elite institutions effectively like field stations, rather than as currently sucking in people from the environment and training them and not giving back. They now become centers where they give back by having access to top quality people and resources in a hub and spoke model to rapidly stimulate research in the broader ecosystem. This is what the US National Science Foundation did decades ago, and it transformed the US. And you have small Midwestern universities, Southern universities in the US doing extraordinary research. This is also what happened in the UK when the Haldane principle was amplified in new ways, so that you have seeding of universities other than the 2 or 3 major ones. So this will be truly transformative. So this is a major budget announcement. All the paperwork has been substantially done, and I do hope that it will mature very soon. I'm sure it will. It also allows great flexibility for industry academia interactions in multiple ways. So this is what India needs to do. Other countries have done that brilliantly. Korea, Singapore, Switzerland, in their own way, similar to the US National Science Foundation. And the UK, I find it interesting. The UK was beating well above its weight, and each tried to integrate its scientific approaches and has done really well. So we really have to move fast on the NRF, and I'm sure that'll happen.
Professor Rangarajan.
Well, I think Vijay has said it all. I'll just be brief. I think what generally researchers are expecting is a very flexible funding system. So in the existing funding system, there are quite a few rigidities, which have unfortunately crept in. So I think what NRF promises is something that would be truly wonderful, where we have a flexible funding system which trusts the researchers to do the right thing and gives them flexibility in using the grants that are given, and what I think really spreading the money to all the stakeholders, including, I think, always private universities have sort of always been a bit discriminated against, but that's also going away. So I think all that is good. So I think it'll be a good move.
Thank you. So Patrick, what's worked well, what's not worked so well with UKRI, and are there any relevant shared experiences to share?
Well, maybe I'll answer a slightly different question to start off with, which is if you look at COVID and what happened with getting researchers from different disciplines to come together to tackle big societal problems, it was remarkable how well that worked and how quickly that worked. And I think that tells you that there are ways you can get money out of the door to researchers in interdisciplinary ways really quickly that leads to good results. And that, I think, is one of the challenges in the funding system, is how do we make all that work, not during a crisis, but at other times as well. Where I think UKRI has brought something together which is important is to bring innovation into the research councils, so that we're not thinking of it purely as an academic funding activity, but all of the issues around small companies and how you get innovation through into the economy. And I think what needs to happen is to make sure there's enough money in the system, which there now is with an uplift, to allow cross-council, so cross-research council working to really turn into something important. Because when you're on a flat budget, you can't make that happen without taking something away from people, and that's really difficult. But in an uplifted budget, it should be possible to start to get true interdisciplinary work going, and I hope that's what UKRI will be able to do.
Thank you. Mary, any thoughts on this question?
Well, I mean, I guess I would also add, I think UKRI has, apart from the COVID response, not really had the opportunity to demonstrate how it is going to do that because of, challenges with spending reviews, and it's only just at the point now where it's going to, I think, really hopefully realize the potential for interdisciplinary science. I think there is a couple of important principles though to maintain that the UK does very well, and one is a focus in those funding bodies on excellence and funding excellence wherever it is, and that's really important. That's and maintaining the Haldane principle there, but also through things like high funding and enabling academic institutions to really focus on the things that they want to deliver, and delivering some of that innovation piece and policy piece through through block grants in that space, and making sure that that's protected actually. So it's protection of what you want to deliver. Is it excellence? Is it geographical spread? Depending on what you deliver, you will get a result, and being careful you don't get a different result to the one you wanted, because you need to really make sure you protect the science that you want to deliver and you spread excellence. You don't just spread money.
Can I just have one thing about the word excellence? Because very often in funding circles, excellence is taken to mean basic science. Basic science needs to be excellent, but so does applied science.
Correct.
And it's really important that we don't, and you weren't doing this, but I know it's done. We don't think of excellence as meaning only basic science. We want all of the science, including the development side of it, to be as good as it can possibly be.
Yes. Well, my home here is an engineering site.
Yeah.
I have to be careful on that. Yeah.
So we're going to try to take a couple of questions from the room, and then I've got some prepared questions that were given to me earlier as well. But I'm going to start with the gentleman at the back. If you'd kindly identify yourself and also say to whom you are posing your question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's more a comment than a question to the entire panel, actually. I'm Majid Lalvani, Chair of Infectious Diseases here at Imperial, and I also am the Chair of the Strategic Advisory Council to the India Alliance. And the India Alliance is an innovative, unique model that I think deserves replication more widely. For those who don't know of it, it's a £160 million fund created by the Government of India, Department of Biotechnology, of which Vijay Raghavan was the Secretary of State in India for the Department of Biotechnology that triggered the Indian funding of it. So he's one of the founders of it. And the other partner is the Wellcome Trust in the UK that put up half the money, and going forwards, it's putting up about a third, with the Indian government continuing to put up 2/3. It funds the best biomedical researchers in India. It's transformed the research ecosystem there by bringing Wellcome Trust and MRC style panels for evaluating and awarding the fellowships. It's had a wide impact on medical science, innovation, and the landscape, not only in basic science. Many fellows have been awarded to work in Professor Rangarajan's esteemed institute, but many others are working on issues such as tribal health, maternal and child nutrition, gender violence, all kinds of issues around the country. And two interesting trends have been there relevant to the last few minutes of discussion. One is that over the 10 years or more that I've been involved with it, it allows, in fact, it makes sure that every fellow spends at least a year working in an overseas university. It started off being that more than half of the fellows opted for the UK for their year, and now it's a much, much smaller proportion, with many more fellows choosing the US and continental Europe. And the second trend is a good one, unlike the first one, and that is that when it initially started, it was funding fellows inevitably perhaps in elite institutions in India, the 10% that Vijay Raghavan alluded to, but now that is spread out. And in fact, we had an editorial in The Lancet some years ago, Vijay, about exactly that point, and we predicted it would spread out, and it's done so. So it's an interesting model, and it really has transformed the research ecosystem in India. And I would suggest that maybe a topic for action in the future could be another similar model or further funding of this model. Wellcome Trust, because of its statutes, can't fund it beyond the next 2 to 3 years. So there will be an opportunity for other funders, whoever may be interested, whether from the UK or India or elsewhere, to help fill that gap. And perhaps Vijay might want to respond a little to this point, since he's the founder of it, really, the grandfather.
Over to you, Professor Raghavan.
You could only call him the father of it. Really.
Thank you very much. I think, this is a very important point about how global charities such as the Wellcome Trust, which transformed science, life sciences in the UK, is having a global impact. And the DBT, the Department of Biotechnology, Wellcome Trust India Alliance, has spread out all over the country, proving that earlier allegations that it might stay within elite institutions alone were wrong. It's really transformed the Indian life sciences space. Now, going forward, one really spectacular thing the trust has done, in a manner similar to what the UKRI has been created to bring together science in the UK, is to feature. The trust is now going to be focusing on climate change, disease biology, and mental health, along with its discovery research. This is a major change, and as one of the world's largest charities, it'll have global impact. And the trust's director and their board of governors, I'm sure, are discussing with people in India about how the next level of partnerships can go through. Along the lines of what I was just saying, we have had partnerships of certain kinds before. The next decade needs another kind, and this is exactly inputs from organizations such as the Wellcome Trust. Partnering in India would be absolutely valuable.
Thank you very much, Professor Rangarajan.
I would like to add one point, since philanthropy was brought about. So this is something which has not been tapped that much, and which we were pleasantly surprised when we started the medical school, the postgraduate medical school in the Indian Institute of Science. We started raising money from private donors, and it was a great surprise to me, a pleasant surprise, although, that we managed in a very short span of time. We have already raised £100 million. So all from Indian companies and Indian philanthropists. So I think just like Wellcome Trust has contributed so much, I think this is one untapped sector of Indian philanthropists. You all know about the number of unicorns which are being generated in India every year, and a lot of the IT companies have all made a lot of money, and I think many of them are now willing to give back. This is something which needs to be tapped into, which will greatly supplement with much more flexible funding for India-UK partnerships.
Thank you very much. We have time for one last question. The lady in the scarf, blue scarf. Yeah, there we go. Hi, please introduce yourself and say to whom you're asking the question.
My name is Rajeshwari. I'm an alumnus of Imperial, and it's an honor to be here in the presence of such esteemed panelists. I think it's really a follow-on from what Professor Rangarajan is saying. I'm the founder of an EdTech company here in the UK, and I'm very, very keen to know what partnerships exist or what has been put in the roadmap to encourage government-level partnerships, but also taking into account smaller EdTech companies, tapping into the venture capitalists in both the countries to bring artificial intelligence-based accessible education to the masses, especially across India and the population in India. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Who wants to have a first go at what is the government doing to support edtech startups that bring together the UK and India? Is there anybody have any? With maybe the High Commissioner, Your Excellency, did this feature in the bilateral discussions?
Can I be heard? Yes. I must say that we have been talking about EdTech in the past. Somehow it wasn't on the top of the priority list in this round, but listening to the participants, listening to the need to spread excellence rather than just spend funding. And we both were just talking about how the pandemic has showed us that online learning can be efficient. It may not be perfect, but if we can, and there are a number of startups in India who are doing brilliantly with EdTech. And I think, Your Excellency, Lord Johnson, you yourself have encouraged EdTech a lot. So we are, I would immediately put this on top of my agenda. And I think with the guidance of the scientists in India and Professor Vijay Raghavan, Professor Govindan, let's see how we can do something on EdTech. Along with the other institutions that you might recommend to me. Let's see how we can do something on India-UK EdTech. That would be my effort.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Well, I think that's a good note on which to bring our discussions to a close. I want to thank our eminent participants and discussants, Professor Raghavan, Professor Rangarajan. It's been great having you with us. Thank you so much for your time. It's worked brilliantly, the technology. And also I want to thank Sir Patrick Vallance and Mary Ryan from Imperial. Great to have you too. So there is now a canapes and drinks reception, which is going to be held in the college main entrance. So everybody is sadly we won't be with our guests from India, but everybody else is most welcome there now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.